Apple entered the networking market in the summer of 1999 with their base station access points, as well as airport Wi-Fi cards for wireless clients. Much has changed since 1999 with Apple's networking devices. We've seen the design change from flying saucer-like routers to a Mac Mini-looking device, to even a tall tower like this one. They no longer make any networking devices as of 2016, but continue to support some of the devices into 2021. So today we are going to take a look at Apple's 5th generation Airport Extreme. This model was released in 2011 as Apple's 5th revision of their Airport Extreme series. Looking at the official specs from their website, Apple states that the router is equipped with 802.11a, b, g, and n Wi-Fi across a dual band 2.4 and 5 GHz frequency. This means that the router should have decent Wi-Fi speeds. The dual band will allow supported devices, which pretty much all of them are today, to connect to the 5 GHz channel if the normal channels are being crowded by, say, your neighbor's Wi-Fi or maybe even your cordless phone. It is also stated that this router has Network Address Translation, or NAT, DHCP, PPPoE, DNS Proxy, SNMP, Internet Protocol version 6 or IPv6, and VPN pass-through including IPsec, PPTP, and L2TP. If you aren't a network expert, I know I just threw some scary terms at you, but to sum it up, this airport has all the features that I expect most consumer routers should have, and it's pretty up to date. For security, we got WPA and WPA2 for wireless. I wouldn't use WPA at all, but for the time being, WPA2 is perfectly fine, though I would recommend upgrading to an access point with WPA3 if you're buying a brand new high-end router. This is because you can use it longer and it will remain safe in the next years. WEP is also provided but is very outdated. Don't recommend using it at all. We have a NAT firewall, which basically just conserves IP addresses on the internet and allows you to use all your devices connected to the internet using the same public IP. Other features include radius authentication, PEAP, LEAP, TTLS, TLS, FAST, and time-based access control. Looking at the interfaces, we have a gigabit Ethernet WAN port for connecting to your internet service provider's modem, 3 gigabit LAN ports for your local network, and a USB 2.0 port for external storage and printers, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. There is also a power connector on the back and an indicator light on the front. Each of the ports contain a connectivity light but doesn't show network traffic, just whether or not there is a device connected to that port. The unit runs on 12 volts DC, 1.8 amps, and cannot be powered by PoE or power PoE devices. There's a lot more interesting information on Apple's website, like the operating temperature and altitude, as well as FCC approvals. I'll have that link in the description. Also, going in a little bit deeper than what Apple's website said, I found a post on smallnetbuilder.com about the insides of the router. It holds a Marvell 88F6-281 1.2 GHz CPU. You heard me right, gigahertz in a consumer router. This CPU is used in many inexpensive NASes, such as Synology's DiskStation DS210J. The heart of the switch is another Marvell controller, 88E6350R, that allows for 7 gigabit ports, but as we know, this device only utilizes 3 LAN ports. We have 128 megabytes of RAM as well as 16 megabytes for ROM. There is a lot more detailed information on the site, which I found myself intrigued with. That is, again, in the link in the description below. Although the one I will be reviewing is used, what's included in the box is the Airport Extreme itself, a power supply, and the documentation. The design of the unit itself is very Apple-like. It looks similar to an Apple TV or a Mac Mini with its square shape and rounded edges. Even though this device was released in 2011, it has the older Apple style. Mac Minis and other Apple products released at the time had all the metal casings. The unit seems to be closer to a mid to late 2000s Apple product with its plastic white housing. And looking at the newest releases of the Apple Airport, there was still no change. They were still the shiny white plastic, but also notice that other Apple products have this theme, such as the AirPod or the front bezel of iPhones and iPads. The Airport Extreme is different from many routers as it isn't configured by a web interface, which is typical Apple, being a little bit different. You can configure the device from a program that you can get for Mac OS, Windows, and iOS. It automatically discovers the device, and you can configure settings such as the IP and Wi-Fi password. At first I did find this annoying, and I do still think it should have a web interface, but I also realized it is a great tool for less advanced users. Try explaining to a beginner on how to configure a normal router in Windows. Windows key plus R, ipconfig/all. In one of the connections, put the default gateway IP in your browser. Look up the router's default password. So it is pretty confusing. For the Airport utility, it's pretty simple. Plug in the Airport, download the utility, run it, and configure your router. I do like this and hope that this technology is used for other routers, especially the ISP provided ones that most people have. Fortunately, some ISPs have apps for controlling your network, and there's the whole security and safety side to it, not allowing public access to your network, but this is a topic for another video. To install the utility, look up the Airport software for your device. Simply download the software and install it. I did not have any issues installing it on Windows 10, and the utility should automatically detect your Airport. From there, you can configure your settings and check the status of your router. There are lots of Apple services such as Bonjour and AirPlay integrated in the router. You can configure the IP settings, including the subnet mask, and yes, this can be used as an access point only if you wish. Remote access settings may also be configured, such as back to my Mac, which is no longer even used. You can forward ports, however, there is no triggered port forwarding. There are many features missing that many advanced users would want, but for the most part, they aren't necessary for the average user. We also have file and printer sharing configuration, in which we will experiment with later. Once done configuring your router, you can upload the configuration and apply the settings. What is nice about the software is that you can save, load, and change configurations for the Airport. This isn't entirely useful unless you want to revert back to your old config if a new one doesn't work, or are constantly changing your configuration. The firmware may also be updated from the Airport utility. Let's look at the file and printer sharing features of this router. As I noted, there is a single USB 2.0 port on the back of the Airport Extreme. According to Apple, this can be used to connect storage mediums such as flash drives or external hard drives, as well as USB printers. Apple's site specifically says that it supports external hard drives, but I'm not sure how much power is provided from the USB port. I don't think anyone will be attaching tons of storage to this thing, but it is possible to get a powered USB hub or adapter for a power-hungry hard drive. So let's start with file sharing. Only FAT32 and HFS drives are supported, so no NTFS or eXT formats. It was a little bit confusing to set up and took a little while. I tried accessing the Airport Samba share in many different ways until I found that you could use a double slash than what you named your Airport device, in my case Home Airport. From there you can see all the file shares. I proceeded to test the speed of the file sharing, but I had lots of issues with transferring larger files, and Crystal Disk Mark got stuck. I copied different files, and even some that were just hundreds of megabytes took a while to finally transfer. The only thing that I would use this for is smaller files like documents or photos. Moving on to connecting a printer, I decided to test my favorite one. This one's my favorite, not necessarily because it's a good printer, it's not. I just like how it's called, the Epson XP420. After plugging it into the USB port, I tried to get it detected through the Airport utility, however it wasn't detected at all. If I switched it over to the storage mode, it did detect the printer's SD card slot, so it might be a driver issue. I don't have tons of printers to test, so I just ended it here. I did try looking through the settings of both the printer and the Airport utility, but still no avail. So obviously this device doesn't hold up well with its USB connectivity, and there are lots of issues with using it as a file server as well as print server, so I would not be relying on this functionality for this device. Overall, I would say that this device is good for being a simple firewall, switch, and access point, or turning off the routing features and using it as a switch and access point. It is definitely not the best consumer router that I've seen, but I do have to say for 2011 it was way ahead of its time. Gigabit Ethernet and 5 GHz channels would come into play in the next few years, but most residential routers of the time didn't have these features. It has some nice configurability, although lacks many features that you would see on other routers, and especially third-party firmwares such as Tomato or OpenWRT. For 2021, I would say that this is definitely still usable. I wouldn't recommend it to be a main router, but it could be used as an access point. I would definitely not go out of my way to buy this. I mean, I found this one at Goodwill, but I would recommend that this thing should be purchased for around $30 USD on eBay or other online stores. As I said, I wouldn't go out of my way to purchase it, and you should probably get a more modern networking device, but if you come across one with a cheap price, it's not totally a piece of garbage. It's actually a pretty decent networking device. I hope you enjoyed this review and especially learned something from it, and how Apple's products are quite interesting, and really I just want to say their products have never ceased to surprise me. I mean, looking back at especially their old products, we've seen some innovations that we have not seen before. They were very ambitious with what they did with their products, but also they just have that look to them that's, you know, overpriced and all, and that's just my opinion. I don't really like Apple, but there's just a beauty about them that even their routers look pleasing to the eye.